Hello and welcome to this very special edition of the NewsHour Agenda that we're bringing to you from Washington, D.C. It was, in fact, a display of bonhomie and camaraderie just 3 weeks after President Trump took over the Oval Office. Prime Minister Modi, one of the first few world leaders to meet with President Trump. And what's been very interesting is the enhanced cooperation that the two countries have announced, an intent to double the bilateral trade to about $500 billion over the next 5 years. And playing a very, very important role in this bilateral trade is expected to be the defense sector, because clearly it is this area where not just the technology transfer and defense co-production that has been announced in terms of the intent between the two countries, but also the United States has offered one of its technological marvels, if we can call it that, the F-35, being seen as perhaps the most technologically advanced fighter jet to India. Now, while the Indian response has been rather muted at this point of time, and certainly, of course, the process of procurement as far as a fifth-generation fighter has not formally begun in India, there's also the fact that India has traditionally been dependent largely on Russian defense equipment, although there have been huge purchases from the United States in recent years as well. Let's quickly take a look at what really makes the F-35 so important. Clearly, one of the most technologically advanced aircraft. It's an aircraft that is in fact used by several of United States allies, and clearly, of course, is something that could be a game changer. Pakistan already responding to this particular announcement from the US, talking about a possible imbalance in South Asia if the F-35 is provided to India. Let's first take a look at the announcement that was made.
Starting this year, we'll be increasing military sales to India by many billions of dollars. We're also paving the way to ultimately provide India with the F-35 stealth fighters. We're giving a very violent man, it seems to me. I mean, I don't know that he's been convicted yet or will be, but let's assume he's a pretty violent person. We're giving him back to India immediately, and there are more to follow because we have quite a few requests. So we work with India on crime.
आज हमने द्विपक्षीय व्यापार को 2030 तक 2 गुना से भी अधिक बढ़ाकर $500 बिलियन तक पहुंचाने का लक्ष्य निर्धारित किया है। अमेरिका और भारत मिलकर के हमारी कोशिश है और हमारी कोशिश रहनी चाहिए कि इस प्रकार की पूरी इकोसिस्टम को हमें जड़ मूल से नष्ट करना चाहिए ताकि ह्यूमन ट्रैफिकिंग बंद हो।
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Let's now go across to our guest. Joining us with us is Jeff Smith. He's the director of the Heritage Foundation's Asian Studies Center. We also have with us Air Marshal Anil Khosla, who's a former Vice Chief of Air Staff. Joining us on the panel also is Tim Roma, former U.S. Ambassador to India. Now, Jeff Smith, let me begin with a big-ticket announcement. It's not just about the F-35s, but there's an entirely different paradigm that we appear to be heading into, with the United States talking about sharing all sorts of technology and military hardware with India. Do you think that this is going to be a complete game changer in the approach to which India and US actually have their military ties, and also, of course, will boost both countries' manufacturing capabilities?
Yes, I do think we are in the process of taking that next step in the military partnership. We heard some very exciting announcements during Prime Minister Modi's visit. Some of them are sort of big ticket concepts and ideas that I would like to see the details filled out in the coming months and years ahead. But I think as an early tone setter, I think both leaders are saying we want to be very ambitious. No technologies are off of the table, and the horizon for military to military cooperation has probably never been brighter. The one thing I would like to see soon is more progress on the F-414 fighter engine deal, which I also think is important to the military partnership. But in terms of F-35, in terms of the new compact agreement, a new 10-year defense partnership coming this year that we need to re-up, I think we need to be very ambitious.
Right. But Jeff, one of the things that's being spoken about is the F-35. But you also have the Russians who are offering their own fifth generation fighter jet to India. Can you take us through how the F-35, is markedly different from other fifth generation fighters, and how does it really increase the capabilities of any air force? Because there are several allies of the United States who also have the F-35s.
Well, I think the F-35 is the most capable combat aircraft that India could buy. I would put our fifth generation fighter aircraft up against Russia's any day of the week. I don't think the quality has ever been really in question. I think what we've had in the past is concerns about Russian military hardware and the way that things like the S-400 missile defense system, there are problems with that operating in the same space as the U.S. F-35 aircraft. We also have not in the past had the same level of trust in our defense establishments that we do today. And so there are new opportunities coming, and I think President Trump is willing to look at defense cooperation through a new paradigm in a way that we haven't before. But in terms of quality, you can ask the Indian Air Force whether or not they think the F-35 is a capable aircraft.
Sure. Let me, in fact, bring in Air Marshal Khosla on that count. Air Marshal Khosla, you're probably the best qualified to talk about this in terms of the comparison with the Su-57E, the capabilities of the F-35. The Indian government at a press conference was rather reserved, saying that there's no such procurement process that has begun from the Air Force's side. It is, of course, going to be a very costly aircraft from the Indian perspective as well, with a lifetime cost aimed at over $1 trillion. How are you looking at this announcement, Air Marshal Khosla?
Yeah, Madhav, so at the moment, Indian Air Force actually desperately needs a technology infusion and, in terms of fighter aircraft, both in numbers, that is quantity as well as quality. Our adversary has already flown sixth generation prototype, and they are adding fifth generation aircraft in a very, very large number. On the other side, our Western adversaries are also likely to get Chinese-made fifth generation aircraft. They might get it. So in this scenario, I think there's an urgent need, and Indian Air Force has already originated the procurement process for 114 MRFA, which has been lingering for some time. I think time has come for us to expand that program and include fifth generation aircraft. So at the moment, choice, as you said rightly, is between F-35 and the Su-57, and both were there at the Aero India this time. And F-35 definitely has got technologically most advanced aircraft at the moment, and already proven in various exercises and operational scenarios as compared to Su-57. As the time progresses, we'll come to know. I think both sides will offer, give their offer for the aircraft as well as. But the major thing, important thing, Madhav, is that while Indian Air Force is in need, the deal, if it goes through, will have to look into one very important factor. US should not look at India as just a plain buyer. I mean, it should look at it as a partner and support the, technology, transfer of technology, and support the initiatives of India, in terms of Atmanirbharta, self-reliance, because that is a long-term solution. So that is very, very important. Rather looking at just buyer of, say, 2 squadrons or 3 squadrons is not good enough. You have to have transfer of technology and support the Indian initiatives. Yeah, Madhav.
Right. Jeff, I think that's a very important point. It's not just about the fighter jets themselves or making the big ticket purchases, but also investing in transfer of technology. And there has been some amount of announcement in terms of cooperation, particularly as far as defense production is concerned. How practical is it? And do you really see this being implemented on ground? There have been hurdles and challenges in the past, but do you think this time round it's all set to change?
Well, as you said, there have been hurdles. To be honest, we've had challenges. For 15 years plus, we've been trying to do co-production and co-development, initially starting with DTTI, starting with small systems, autonomous drones. It was difficult slog in the beginning. Only recently have we begun making progress on some of these smaller items. The reason I brought up the F-414 engine deal is because I think that would actually be the logical next step in our defense technology co-production arrangement. That would honestly be a symbolically and substantively major goalpost to cross, which is why I was really hoping to see more progress on that, and maybe that is yet to come. But I think if that can happen, that opens the door to even more cooperation on things like F-35. I'll be honest, we haven't been having serious discussions about the F-35 until now. That has mostly been seemingly off the table for both countries. It's only recently, I think, with President Trump's second term that we've begun to think more ambitiously on whether or not we could turn this into a major tenet of the defense partnership and possibly even a co-production element to it. So the answer is yes, but I think we're very early on.
Right. Right. Emmanuel Khosla, let me bring you in on this aspect. What is it about the F-35 that actually makes it, so desired of the various air forces, short takeoff, vertical landing, and all sorts of other capabilities? And in India's unique situation where we have on our eastern and western front two countries that are not necessarily, good neighbors in that sense, what really do you think will be the role of an aircraft such as the F-35 that will be, unique in terms of India's own strategic situation?
Yeah, Madhav. So, as I said earlier, F-35 at the moment is considered as world's most technologically advanced aircraft. And for yesterday at the Air India, both the aircraft were flying F-35 and Su-57. Let me admit, Su-57 stole the heart and the heart of the crowd. And its maneuverability was awesome. I've never seen an aircraft flying like that ever before. It seemed as if there is a dry leaf in the air, turbulent air, and being thrown around. It defied all the laws of physics and aerodynamics. But the point is, in today's combat, it is not the maneuverability and that is important. Important is how much technology is inside in terms of weapons, in terms of radars, in terms of electronic warfare, in terms of stealth, in terms of super cruise, in terms of range, in terms of endurance, and a whole lot of works. So I think F-35 in that field is way ahead, and Su-57 still it is in a nascent stage, and how much technology is introduced into it, time will tell. But once again, if the choice is between the two, there'll be a whole lot of strategic factors. So some of them have been mentioned, and some more are there, which will be very, very relevant for decision making. So I will not take much time. I'll just say one thing. Like in the past, US, I won't say trust deficit, but trust doubt because of various past incidents of 1971 and the sanctions. And so worry is, in time of need, if the tap is closed, then where do we go? Whereas Russia has been forthcoming in technology transfer. MiG-21 is a classic case where production was taking place. So that is a major issue which needs to be considered. Besides cost factor and the timelines for delivery and technology transfer.
Jeff, absolutely. Jeff, one interesting factor is that Pakistan's already started reacting. They are saying that if F-35s are supplied to India, it's going to cause a regional imbalance. And if you look at the joint statement yesterday, it has some pretty strong words, particularly as far as Pakistan's own role in exporting terror and supporting such groups operating on its soil, and the need to take action on terrorist groups which have perpetrated terror on Indian soil. How do you see this aspect playing out as far as the United States is concerned?
Well, I've made no secret of my opinion. I don't particularly care what Pakistan thinks about the U.S.-India defense partnership. They lost the right to object to that when they were funding terrorism that was killing American soldiers in Afghanistan for so many years, and when they were funding terrorism inside of India. If they don't like the close defense partnership we have, then they could have been more responsible actors toward both of our countries. I'm sure they will object and try to get closer to China as a result. And my own perspective is good luck with that. Good luck to China. I hope you have better luck with Pakistan than we did, because it's probably going to bring you nothing but pain and grief in the end.
Absolutely, and I think we know a thing or two about the kind of role that Pakistan has played. Marshal Khosla, the very fact that Tahawur Rana is all set to return, and President Trump also indicating that this could be just the first in a series of requests that are accepted by the U.S. regime that India has, and there are several such groups and individuals who India wants for actually not just being inimical to India's interests, but carrying out such violent terror attacks on India. How do you see this in terms of a new paradigm as well, in terms of returning these individuals who India very clearly wants?
So that is very important, as brought out, these terrorism, the perpetrators of the terrorism need to be brought to the book. And India's stance is very, very clear. They got nothing against common people of Pakistan, and that is what happened in Balakot also. The target which was chosen and attacked was, very, very legitimate. And the message was very, very clear that our patience has run out. The cost will be high. And if escalation be there, let it be. The nuclear saber rattling doesn't work. And we will take appropriate action. We will not limit it to the POK, but we will go beyond if required. So that message was very, very clear. So in this case, India's stance is very, very clear that they are against the terror, the acts of terror, the people who perpetuate that, and people who support them, and not the common people of any country. So this is a very, very important aspect that these people are brought back and brought to the book. Yeah.
Right, and let me also, in fact, turn to Timothy Roma, who's been a former U.S. ambassador to India. Mr. Timothy Roma, we've seen the landmark 2008 civil nuclear deal between India and the United States. Perhaps after so many years, it's for the first time that we're looking at, actually operationalizing it on ground. How do you view the move to actually bring in the small and medium reactors? And do you think that with India announcing its intent to change the legal hurdles that were there in implementation as far as liability clauses and other such aspects, do you think that finally we're going to see some movement on this area of civil nuclear energy use?
Well, this has been a long road, right? You know the history here, but going back to the Bush administration in 2005 and 2006, where the civil nuclear deal first was proposed between the two countries and negotiated very carefully. It took a long time to implement. I worked on it in 2009, 2010, 2011, still was not completed. It's still not completed today. And now we're talking about some of the smaller nuclear modules and a potential here. So again, the devil is in the details. I think it's a promising and hopeful announcement where our two countries have built trust on nuclear technology, built trust on sensitive defense technology, built trust on very, very sensitive intelligence sharing and information sharing around the world. So that trust is at the very heart of our relationship, that without leaks on either side, we can work together without, this technology getting to the wrong people, terrorists who would use it in nefarious ways. We can hold clearly on these very, very important issues. But we'll see how this progresses. These are not easy issues to negotiate and then implement, especially as they extend either in the defense community or the business and the private sector community. It is taking us almost 2 decades to implement some of this on the civilian nuclear side, and we're still not there at the finish line. So let's work on this. Again, let's not get the cart before the horse. Let's work on implementing and executing on some of these agreements that we hope that will benefit both our economies, both our peoples, and both our countries. Implementation is key.
Right. Jeff Smith, do you agree with that? Are we putting the cart before the horse over here when we're talking about the civil nuclear deal? Are we getting our hopes up too high?
Maybe I've been beaten down by 15 years of unmet expectations on civil nuclear cooperation. So I would keep my expectations tempered for now. I'm glad it's still on the agenda. I'm glad it's still progressing forward. But my own personal view is that the civil nuclear deal has already accomplished most of what it was meant to achieve, which was to establish a bond of strategic trust between our two countries, which ultimately paved the way for the defense cooperation that we see today, the geopolitical convergence, and some of even the economic cooperation. So to me, I would love to see more progress on this. I think it advances the interests of both countries. I think energy security can and should be a bond between our two countries, one that's growing even more important by the year. But I view it more at this point as icing on the cake rather than the cake itself, maybe because I've had my expectations unmet for so long.
Right. And also, let me bring in Mr. Roma on the aspect of the Indian Ocean strategic venture. It's a significant step of strengthening the U.S. and India ties, particularly in the Indian Ocean region. How do you think this is going to play out, Mr. Roma, in terms of not just the economic ties between the two countries, but also enhancing security in the region?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think when we get the economic issues settled and some of the irritants, whether that might be port building in Iran, whether that might be immigration, whether that might be India buying air defense equipment from Russia, those things we can manage and we can talk about and get through. Then you get on to China and how the United States and India see China in a common way. Geopolitically, and we're working more and more on security issues together, the two of us, India and the United States. And as you mentioned, there are countless issues where the United States and India will work together and are working together now. You know, it is almost unlimited. Energy, defense, intelligence sharing, undersea issues and security issues, artificial intelligence, space and communications, education, democracy. And we just went through 2 elections, one in the United States and one in India. The United States and India show the world how the people run the government, how it's a government of, by, and for the people. And that's a powerful sign in the world today. So the number of areas strategically and geopolitically where the United States and India have common interests are where we should spend so much of our time in terms of crafting a more peaceful and prosperous world.
All right, Jeff Smith, Air Marshal Anil Khosla and Tim Roma, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us and sharing with us your perspective. It's a landmark bilateral visit. It really sets the tune for the next 4 years of the Trump administration, and how much of what's been promised, what's been announced will actually be implemented on ground remains to be seen. But if there is even a significant chunk of this implemented, it has huge implications for India as well as the United States. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, gentlemen.